Welcome to the Tucker Marlor Show. I'm your host, Tucker Marlor. Joined with me today is Henry Lever. Henry, what do you think libertarianism is?
Libertarianism is strict adherence to private property rights and the non-aggression principle. It is the ethical system that is opposed to the initiation of conflict.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Why? Well, what is the story? Why did you become a libertarian?
So I was raised kind of classical liberal by my parents.
Oh,
Um, my mom especially had a very classical liberal background, so I was sort of like a sort of small government free market type. My parents were into the Tea Party when that was a thing in the
oh,
Republican
nice.
Party. Um, so I kind of came from that background, definitely with a more foreign interventionist bent than is really sort of accepted in libertarian circles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, sort of come adulthood, I ended up joining the military. I'd always planned to, but it didn't exactly work out. Uh, that was in 2020 when COVID happened at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also just kind of searching for what I viewed as a consistent ethical system. Um, I had sort of dabbled in Randian objectivism for like a month in high school, but I hadn't found anything that really quite satisfied me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sort of as I was becoming slowly more just sort of instinctively anti-government, uh, I was a Reason TV subscriber, and I saw Scott Horton's debate with Bill Kristol at the Soho Forum.
Oh, that's a good one.
And that sort of took me down the anti-war rabbit hole, introduced me to the Mises Caucus, which introduced me to Austrian libertarianism.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, it really started out as radical politics. I was radicalized against the state, and then sort of stumbled into this realization that, oh, actually, maybe the non-aggression principle is the consistent ethical system that I've been looking for all this time.
Mm-hmm. But something your story reminded me of. I believe so. We were on a bus. We were sitting next to each other, and I
Yes,
forget how it came up, but you had mentioned something about how you were like your leg got hurt or something, and it was weird because
yeah,
you said it like with a smile on your face, and you're like happy about it, and it was because that you said that it was a good way to just get out of the military, like you're kind of just done with it because you're like
absolutely,
you figured out it
absolutely.
was immoral. So maybe you could just add on that because that was seriously one of the craziest moments I had heard about.
Yeah, yeah. I had an injury fairly early on in Marine Corps training. I blew out my knee, tore all the ligaments. Ended up after a couple years of sort of surgeries and roundabout bureaucratic medical processes, I ended up getting a medical separation. And yeah, when that happened, I was quite happy because by the time I was separated, I had already concluded that working for the government was ethically wrong, and I just didn't really have a good way to stop without getting in trouble. So as far as I'm concerned, the medical separation was quite fortunate.
Yeah, which is that's such an amazing story to me. To hear about something that's like in any other case we'd consider that to be horrible, but it actually ended up like you're like, oh, fantastic. It kind of reminds me in the last episode of the show, I was talking to Halit, and he was talking about how like he was trying to figure out what the correct position on borders are and if we should have a border or not, or what's the moral rule for like being an immigrant. And he himself is an immigrant to the United States, and he while he's considering more closed border stance, he was like, oh, maybe I should just leave then if that's the right thing to do. And he ended up changing his mind, and he's now open borders like I am. But it reminds me, it's like you both have this inclination to just be like, even though it's kind of inconvenient, it's like this is like the moral thing. And you guys both you view libertarianism as like it's not just rules, it's not just arguments against government, it's also a way that we should personally live our own lives. This is something I've heard you emphasize in our
Absolutely,
conversations.
absolutely. I think that's probably the most important way to understand libertarianism
Mm-hmm.
is it's a rule for human behavior, including your own. Um, the most famous and notable logical implication of that rule is that it prohibits statehood.
Hmm.
Um, but as far as I'm concerned, it should also be a guide for your personal action. Um, so yeah, something like quitting government service, even if in an inconvenient way, is something I view as deeply ethical and, in fact, an obligation of everyone.
Hmm. Exactly. Which is kind of what ethics are, right? It's obligations
Yeah,
to do certain things.
exactly.
So after becoming a libertarian, remind me, when did you like? What year did you get involved specifically, like in the Mises Caucus? It was around 2021, or?
So yeah, I discovered the Mises Caucus in late 2021.
Hmm.
I think I officially joined in late 2021. I started getting involved with the Arizona Mises Caucus in, I want to say, June of 2022, shortly after the Reno convention.
Hmm.
Um,
That was big.
my state organizers were just following me on Facebook. I had grown a pretty sizable Facebook following, and they realized I was in Arizona. They realized I was a Mises Caucus member. Um, they
Are you still there?
fake. Uh, yeah, I'm still here.
You just cut out
Did
for a
you
second.
lose me?
I think you're good
Okay,
now.
I don't think I have any trouble on my end,
Okay,
but
just real quick, just for the
yeah,
listeners, so there's libertarians, right, which we call like small L libertarians, which are pretty much people like me and Henry, which are just people who are based about politics and hate politics essentially. And then there's Libertarian Party, which is supposed to get people who have that belief system to try and enact their vision, right? So kind of think of it like the conservatives and then the Republicans, right? They're not exactly the same thing, but there's generally a lot of overlap, and they're going to generally be talking about the same things, right? Um,
yeah,
in the
absolutely.
Mises Caucus specifically, so I don't actually know what was like the big caucus before the Libertarian Caucus. And caucuses are like part of parties. They're like parties within parties, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah, yeah. So the Libertarian Party was under the control of the Pragmatist Caucus. Um,
Were they actually named
the
that?
Pragmat, yes, that was their name.
Oh my! I can't
And
imagine naming
the
that.
yeah,
That's so bad.
the Pragmatist Caucus had taken the LP in two different directions.
Hmm.
Three, really, actually, now that I think about it. The first was obviously in a pragmatic direction.
Hmm.
They became much more they became a much more moderate party
Hmm.
that consistently ran candidates for president who could run as like Tea Party Republicans, right?
Hmm.
These were not like principled anti-statists in any sense. They just
Hmm.
wanted to shrink the government. Famously, in 2016, uh, they ran the Gary Johnson Bill Weld ticket. Um, and so, like, there's a lot of problems with that ticket, but just as an example, um, neither Gary Johnson nor Bill Weld uh, ever once said that they would end the Fed if they were elected.
Yeah.
And Bill Weld actually supported the Fed's dual mandate, the
Yeah.
idea
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
Fed should be responsible for not just inflation and and monetary policy, but that they should also manipulate monetary policy to prevent unemployment.
Yeah. So.
So this is the sort of people that were being run by the Pragmatist Caucus. They also made it much more socially left wing.
Hmm.
The Libertarian Party adopted a heavy focus on progressive social policy, and something that people have almost whitewashed now because they forget how bad it was. But the Pragmatist Caucus made the LP much more welcoming to so-called left libertarians and libertarian socialists.
Hmm.
Uh, like Stirnerite egoists and comms, um, all manner of leftists who were social, like anti-state social progressives who did not believe in property rights.
Hmm.
Um, which, yeah, as you could imagine, this was to many people a pretty unacceptable state of affairs. This is why the Mises Caucus got massive.
Hmm.
Um,
The Mises Caucus
so I joined,
is
yeah,
sorry, just real quick. So the Mises Caucus is named after Ludwig von Mises. It's just pronounced the greatest economist ever, uh, and with the idea of being a lot more extreme. You know more about it more than me, though.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to get into the Mises Caucus because I still don't know exactly how to feel about everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that like I joined the Mises Caucus because I wanted an LP that was more focused on property rights. I wanted a right wing propertarian LP.
Mm.
There were a lot of other people who joined that caucus for a lot of different reasons. And part of why the caucus was initially so successful, but ultimately doomed from the start, is that there was no single vision of what the Mises Caucus would be.
Mm.
They managed to attract a lot of attention by being everything to everyone. Unless you were sort of the very unless you were one of the very small group of people who the Pragmatist Caucus had already appealed to, the Mises Caucus was trying to appeal to. So there was all manner of sort of generically right wing libertarians who disagreed on all sorts of things, but were all attracted to the Mises Caucus because there was some part of the promise that they felt like they were getting out of it. And that this is one of the reasons it ultimately fell apart is there was just a lot of people in the caucus who didn't realize they weren't really working towards the same goal.
Mm. Which is a lot easier to do, I think, when you're not in power yet or even in control of a party.
Absolutely. Yeah, 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 exactly. It's very easy to rally people against something obviously bad.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have to start making
Oh, you cut out. You said the word making, and then are you here now? Oh, that is so annoying. I can't hear you right now if you're talking.
you froze.
Okay,
Oh,
I can hear you now.
okay.
Uh,
The video is still choppy.
Sorry about that. It's good on my end, which is
That's
guess is
okay.
what matters as long as you can hear me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so
Yeah, I hear you again.
okay. So you said making. I forget what you were talking about just before about how like it's much easier to have an open tent in a party when you're not enacting policy or even like at the top of a party because
Yeah,
you're not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
making decisions. Yeah.
When you are the minority trying to perform a hostile takeover,
Mm-hmm.
especially of a party that is very obviously being run into the ground,
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to rally people to that cause. But once they had to start making decisions, and particularly because the LP is a democracy, right? They had to make decisions in a way that appealed to the voters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they got pulled in every different direction because fundamentally they had a populist coalition that had no one vision, and there was just absolutely no way for them to appease every aspect of the coalition that they had created. And so one interesting part of that is they kind of just responded to it by making a new enemy for people to rally against, and the enemy was like autists and theory cells within the Mises Caucus itself. So it people who were too particular about libertarian theory or too unwilling to compromise
Mm-hmm.
became like the new enemy to try and rally people against. It it really didn't work very well, obviously. The Mises Caucus sort of barely retained control of the party at the 2024 convention. They didn't get their preferred presidential candidate. And since that convention, the elected LNC has just completely fallen apart. Almost half of them have resigned. There's a new chair. Um, it's a totally different party now.
Mm-hmm.
So in practice, 2024 was a total failure, and the Mises Caucus failed to retain
Mm-hmm.
control.
I do really want to get into your specific involvement in the party, but before you get into that, I think you know more about it than me. I want to get into like why was the last what's it called, like meeting to choose our presidential candidate, like why was that so horrendous? Because every time I learn more and more about it, the more I'm glad I didn't know about it at the time because it's just it makes my brain hurt. It makes me it's bad. It's really bad.
Uh, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. The fundamental issue is, first of all, Michael Rectenwald was a very bad candidate
Hmm.
who nobody in the Mises Caucus wanted. I mean, it all goes back to Dave Smith, really, right? Dave Smith was supposed to run. Dave Smith ended up not running. Um, Caucus leadership knew very early on that Dave Smith was not running and pretended like he was up until the very last minute. They were trying to find replacements that whole time,
Hmm.
and everyone with any sense said, I am absolutely not running for president on an LP ticket. That's insane. Go away. Um, so they found Michael Rectenwald, who, as it turns out, as we've as sort of became apparent over the course of the campaign and has become far more apparent since he lost, Michael Rectenwald is an insane person. Uh, he he was a Marxist
Hmm.
professor who was canceled for being anti-woke. He becomes conservative. He gets his 15 minutes of fame as a canceled professor. He joins the he starts to work. He publishes books. He works at the Mises Institute for a little. He runs as a presidential candidate, and since losing the presidential election, uh, he has seemingly abandoned libertarianism. I don't
Hmm.
think he claims the title anymore. He now runs like a broad, sort of all welcoming anti Israel pack,
So
um,
courageous.
where he sort of rails against Jewish power and constantly talks shit about everyone in the Mises Caucus for failing him.
Yeah. And
It's, yeah,
was
so
it
that's,
was
they
it
run Rectenwald. He's a very weird person.
mhm. Was
Um,
it you? I think was it you who told me that like he was like high out of his mind at the convention.
yes, yes. So this is, at the convention, Rectenwald was being treated essentially as the presumptive nominee.
Mhm.
And so, which was just kind of an insane and very arrogant thing for them to do when they hadn't actually had the vote yet. Um,
Uh-oh. I lost you again. Can you hear me?
was you again? I can't hear you on
I
this
can hear you
side. I'm
now.
sorry. You're back.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I
Yeah.
can just
So
edit it
Donald
out.
Trump,
You're just talking about how he
Donald Trump attended.
oh.
Yeah, Trump attended the LP convention. He gave a speech to mixed reviews, and because he was being treated as the nominee, Rechtenwald was invited to give a speech in response, in refutation, and he gets up on stage, high out of his mind on weed gummy, and basically just says, I don't really feel like talking bad about Donald Trump right now, and gets off.
I mean, to be fair, that's a very libertarian thing of him to do.
That that pissed a lot of people off, but there was already a lot of people pissed at him for like various behind the scenes things, some of which were important, some of which weren't.
Mhm.
And there was also the little problem of Josh Smith. So Josh Smith was elected as the LP vice chair at the 2022 convention, mostly because he was officially endorsed by Dave Smith. Um, Josh Smith is not who the internal Mises Caucus leadership wanted,
Mhm.
because Josh Smith has a reputation of working very well with people and sometimes not seeing things through.
Mhm.
Josh got elected, and lo and behold, he doesn't get along very well with the LNC and ends up resigning.
Hmm.
He then runs for president, explicitly appealing to the Mises Caucus audience, but as a non-Mises Caucus candidate. And Josh Smith is just a vastly more interesting and confident person than my
Mhm.
and so despite being told, you're a heretic, you're gonna get canceled, don't vote for Josh Smith, or you're never welcome in the Mises again. The one thing you absolutely cannot do, you must vote for Michael Rectenwald. A significant portion of the Mises caucus base, especially people who had something personal against Rectenwald or something personal against Michael Heiss, which there was plenty of those people, they all voted Smith. And when Josh Smith was out, they voted Noda because they were not going to vote for Michael Rectenwald.
Mhm.
So that's what happened. Rectenwald simply never had more than 50% of the party. And so when all of the other non-Mises Caucus candidates were had been eliminated, it came down to Michael Rectenwald versus Chase Oliver. Chase Oliver had a slightly higher percentage, but still under 50%. Chase Oliver ran against Noda, and for some, well, McCardle then stated as the chair that if Noda won, that was it. There would be no presidential candidate.
Mhm.
A large portion of the people still voted Noda, but enough changed to Chase Oliver that he got the nomination.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing: Angela was not telling the truth. um, there is no way that convention was going to finish with no presidential candidate.
Mhm.
Um, if Noda won, something would have been done. There would have been another
Sorry,
candidate.
I don't know who's
The
Noda.
none of the above.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought originally, but then you kind
Yeah.
of
So if
made it sound like a person for a second. I was like, hmm.
yeah, no, if none of the above won,
Mhm.
there would have been new nominees. Rules would have been amended. Like something would have happened for there to be a presidential candidate.
Hmm.
Um, and personally, if I was there, I would have voted none of the above.
Yeah, probably
But
me.
Angela lied because Angela wanted to win.
Sorry, I just heard Angela lied and
Um,
then you cut out.
Angela lied about none of the above
Hmm.
uh, being a genuine vote for no presidential candidate at all,
Hmm.
because Angela wanted Chase to win at that point. The minute it became clear that Michael Rectenwald was not going to be nominated
Hmm.
was the minute that she decided that the Libertarian Party was going to try and help Donald Trump.
Oh.
So by telling people, not exactly explicitly telling people, but in her own way, telling people to vote for Chase Oliver, what she was saying was, "Hey, vote for this guy because the right all the right wingers are going to think he's really cringe, and they're going to vote for Trump."
Hmm.
So that became the plan for the rest of the presidential cycle.
That makes a lot of sense from what I've heard
Yeah,
actually. Because I did not know. I'm not too
yeah,
privy to a lot of the stuff going on in the Libertarian Party because I literally don't care that much,
yeah.
to be honest. Um, Interesting.
To be honest, I'm not anymore either.
Yeah,
I
fair
I,
enough.
I'm not. I'm not. As of yesterday, I am once again involved with the LP. Um, I have been re-added to the comms team for the Arizona LP Twitter account.
Hmm.
Um, but outside of Twitter, I have no involvement with. I don't know what's going on in the Arizona LP right now. I don't care.
Sorry, you
Um,
keep cutting out. I don't know if you're
I
just not.
just
I don't know
wait.
if you're not close enough to your mic or something, but
Sorry. And I ratioed them the other day. I just replied, I don't know who you are, but I hope you know you'll never be me. Um,
yeah. So I guess we should probably get into that. So you originally, or they asked you to be the Twitter account, right?
yeah, so after all the drama with the Blake Masters Senate election, where Dave Smith endorsed Blake Masters over the LP candidate,
Hmm.
um, our Arizona Mises Caucus Twitter tweeter, I guess,
Hmm.
he quit and asked me to replace him.
Hmm.
So I ran the Arizona Mises Caucus Twitter for just over a year
Hmm.
before Heiss demanded that I be removed. The Arizona state organizers refused to remove me, and so we rebranded the Twitter account. Um, that lasted for 6 months or so until the Twitter account was banned for threatening too much violence.
Okay, so
Um,
real quick, I want to get into before we get into why Twitter banned you, which is stupid.
yeah,
Why? So Michael Heiss was he? What was he in the party? No, he was high up, but what was his specific role?
Michael Heiss. Michael Heiss was the founder and president of the Mises Caucus.
Okay, and why did he want to get rid of you?
Uh, a handful of reasons. The most notable is that the National Mises Caucus account
Hmm.
um, posted just a bad take. I can't remember exactly what it was, but people responded um, by saying, "Hey, that doesn't exactly conform to the NAP."
Hmm.
And the guy who ran the account replied to all those people from his personal account saying that I don't believe in the NAP and I think we should get rid of it.
Oh my gosh.
So I posted from the caucus account that if you don't believe in the NAP, you should not be in the Libertarian Party, and you certainly should not have a communications position in the Libertarian Party because that is what libertarianism is the NAP.
Yeah.
That was really the start of it.
Just real quick, I'm gonna just for the
Fundamentally,
audience, I'm gonna
yeah,
explain what the NAP is. So the NEP or the NAP, or if you're really cool, the ZAP, is essentially the foundational principle to libertarianism and essentially like why it's true. I guess it's not just a justification, but it's more so explanation of how to apply the principle. And it's called the non-aggression principle or the zero aggression principle if it's the ZAP. And it's essentially saying, hey, you're not allowed to steal or murder or do any other thing where you're initiating a conflict, right? Like somebody's using something first, you can't come along and use it without their permission, essentially.
yeah. So um, I started that fight, and that was what really soured the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the fact that Mises National already just didn't like Arizona very much, um, for lots of reasons we won't get into. But from there, Heiss just more and more did not like my communication style and did not feel that it was in line with what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Both in that it was too theory heavy, too sort of insistent upon like a no compromise vision of libertarianism.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like that I was open borders and wouldn't post about closed borders. And when other Mises accounts posted closed borders things, I would remind them that officially the caucus had no borders position and they weren't supposed to be saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I think the big one was that they felt like I was not what they wanted for their brand. So there was also major disagreements over messaging
Mm-hmm.
between the Mises Caucus and LP national leadership and the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly accusations, some of which were fair, some of which weren't, of New Hampshire just kind of edge lording and sort of being edgy for edgy's sake.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they felt that I was drifting a little too far in that direction.
Seems...
The most notable thing is that I did very often explicitly endorse the idea that there was nothing morally wrong with federal agents. I said it a lot. Of course, it eventually got me banned.
Wait, just real quick,
Yeah.
it cut off. So this is what it sounded like to me. I kept posting about how there's nothing wrong with federal agents. It's like, yeah, well, you better be kicked out of the Libertarian Party for that.
No, I continuously stated from the official account that there was nothing ethically wrong with violence against federal agents.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and that they felt was too far. And of course, they kind of got the last laugh because eventually Twitter agreed. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's uh, that was kind of long and short of it. They wanted me gone. Arizona didn't, so we just kept the account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I won't say that I only agree with that in theory, but also remember I'm not a Platonist. So if you know, you know. But um, okay, so that's kind of the story flow around. And I think the saddest thing to me about the Mises Caucus is I remember when I first heard about it, is it seemed like I didn't really understand what pragmatism was or have much of an emphasis on it. So because I mostly heard about it from Dave Smith, and it's like he on one hand would complain that they were just too pragmatist. The caucus before it, right, and all the Libertarian Party before the Mises Caucus was too pragmatist, but also at the same time that they were too extreme. This is especially a critique now that you hear from the Mises Caucus types today. Is the issue with the Libertarian Party in the past was it was too extreme. And so we need to be more pragmatist. But it seems to me that that's literally the exact opposite of the case, right? Where it's today we're too pragmatist when we were also too pragmatist before, but we need to actually be principled. That's what makes us libertarians different.
I will say that was kind of a later evolution. Like the Mises Caucus was promising a lot of different things to a lot of different people and speaking out of both sides of their mouth,
Mm-hmm.
but you would never hear them say the sort of things that some of the leadership, especially Angela McCardle, have said after it fell apart about the history of the party being too radical.
Yeah.
That is not the sort of thing that they ever was messaged on.
Yeah.
They did at least pay lip service to the idea that the party was once radical and that they would make it radical again.
Mm-hmm. And then you have somebody radical like you, and then it's out with you.
Yeah.
You're done, right? Which
well, I think what it was at that point, I think because once they kind of got the keys to power, nothing ever went to plan.
mm-hmm.
I think a big part of it was they just did not realize the extent to which the success of the pragmatist era of the Libertarian Party was donor driven, and that the major donors really did love the more progressive and moderate Libertarian Party, and taking the LP in both a more right wing and a more radical direction would both be sort of verboten. And so the minute they got power, not only were they highly incompetent, but they were just trying to take the party in a direction that the donors didn't want it to go, and so the donors abandoned the party.
I see.
And once the donors abandoned the party, all bets were off, because the party was sliding into bankruptcy, and they would say or do anything for a little bit of money.
Yeah, it seems to me that like the old Libertarian Party, essentially not the very old, because I do know there's that one guy that, like, even refused to have a driver's license to drive because he was just so based.
Yes.
But I forget his name. I think it was like something Brown. Is that right?
Harry Brown.
Yeah, that's it. Harry
I
Brown.
don't remember if he was the one who refused a driver's license, but Harry Brown was the LP candidate in 2000.
Okay.
And he was incredibly based. Harry Brown wrote a very good paper on September 12th of 2001 about why the events of 9/11 were the predictable consequences of U.S. foreign policy, and warning and predicting that we were going to respond in a way that made things worse.
That takes some balls to do that the day after. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That you would like a lot of libertarian. And it's not like it's their fault. I mean, it's just time passes. But like it's a lot easier to say that with hindsight than to, number one, predict what happens after, and then also just to say, hey, this is our fault the day after, because the day after is pretty much like it's gonna be the opposite. I wasn't alive back then, of course, but
and none of them would ever say this now, but Harry Brown was one of the figures who the Mises caucus used to sell themselves, like specifically with regards to the presidential ticket. The thing that they always said was that sure, Gary Johnson might have gotten the most votes, but he didn't make the most libertarians. If you want to know who made the most libertarians, you need to look at Ron Paul and Harry Brown. Yeah, which is interesting because you don't hear any of them talk about Brown, and I don't think they would. He was just not the kind of guy they would advertise with.
Yeah. It seems
which
to me,
I think really shows the way they shifted in those last few years.
Yeah, it seems to me that, and again, this is just kind of my theory based on the very little knowledge I do have, but it seems to me that kind of somewhere between when Ron Paul ran in like the early 2000s, like the last time, it was like 2008 was when he ran. When's the last time that Ron Paul ran?
The last time Ron Paul ran for president was the 2012 Republican primary.
That's more recent than I thought.
But Ron Paul also ran for president on the LP ticket in the 80s.
Yeah, I did know that.
So oftentimes when people talk about Ron Paul as the idea of what an LP candidate would be, they'll also refer to his LP presidential run.
It seems to me, yeah, I guess he ran as a Republican the last time, right?
Correct.
Okay,
so 2008 and 2012 were both Republican primary elections.
Interesting. So actually, never mind. That actually helps with what I was saying, anyways. So it seems to me that between around 2000 and maybe say 2020, the party sort of just became it was just the biggest party that wasn't Republicans or Democrats, even though it's very small. And
Absolutely.
So they kind of just appealed to anybody who was like doesn't like those two parties, instead of like being like, hey, we're the Libertarians. It's like the Libertarians, we're just like not Republicans and not Democrats. That's who we are, or we're just the good parts of both.
This is why the Libertarians of that era, who I could see taking over the party again, this is why they loved like just boring inane slogans like we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Oh my gosh.
They wanted to make themselves seem like centrists, because they had become the default third party, and they knew that centrists, especially cultural centrists, people who are sort of culturally liberal but not woke, like the Joe Rogan voter, they knew that voter was not happy with Republicans or Democrats, and so they weren't particularly concerned that voter was also not a libertarian. They were sort of just saying, anything that would appeal to that sort of person.
Yeah, so I think this gets into I assume you're familiar with the philosophic theory of history that like Leonard Peikoff talks about a lot.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So essentially, even though I'm almost completely just I guess I would say disgusted, that's not the right term, but I don't care for the Libertarian Party at all. The thing that gives me lots of hope is when I first learned about the philosophic theory of history, which is essentially the idea that what the essence of what determines a people in any time is the philosophy they hold. And once you understand that, you understand that like you don't really care that much about trying to change the Joe Schmo on the street whose ideas are going to be different 2 years from now anyways, because he just soaks in whatever Fox News tells him or whatever. Rather, you should be concerned with what are the real thinkers, what are the principled people, what are the people who would believe something regardless of the time that they live in. What is something? Think of people who try to be principled, right? Those are the people that you should try to convince, and that's the issue with the LP today and in the past.
I think that's a really important way to understand the philosophical theory of history. It's a theory I agree with.
Yeah.
For the record. I think that's a really important way to understand it, is that it is a fundamentally elitist theory of history. Because it will always be the elites who drive philosophy, and in some sense, only the elites have philosophy. So when you understand that, when you understand that there are, to use a term that has kind of become cringe, like key influencers in a society,
Oh, you cut out. Crap. Ay, ay, ay.
Understand that. Sorry, do you hear me?
I can
Yeah,
hear. I can hear you
when you
now.
understand that there's when you understand that there's people within society who have an undue influence on the philosophy of the day,
Mhm,
you realize that you have a much smaller target pool if you want to shape the course of history.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. Like you're. It's not that we should be interested in convincing the vast majority of people or everyone or anything like that. Rather, that we should convince key figures and then move from there, right? Like, and obviously it's kind of absurd example, but it is way more important to convince the top 20 most influential people than, let's say, 6 billion people on the earth, really. Like, because that pretty quickly, maybe 6 billion is too much. Let's say 30
Yeah,
million or
I
something.
was gonna say 6 billion is a lot, but
Let's say 30. Let's say 30
yeah,
million. 30 million people.
I would probably rather convince the 20 most influential people in the world
Mhm.
than a few million uh like totally irrelevant people. Absolutely.
Okay, and it's not even that hard. It's like, I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, but it's not even that hard of a choice. It's like once you realize that, like,
Mhm.
it's better to have somebody who's going to convince
Yeah,
like
it
30
is.
people to vote for something than 20 people, right? And because most people,
Yeah,
influence isn't equal among people, right? Equality's fake, gay, and lame, as
yeah.
Rothbard famously said. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is it's not that we don't want to convert everybody. It's
Mhm.
that, converting elites is converting everybody.
Exactly.
Um, that's that's how you get the most mileage in the long run is you convert people who are going to do conversions for you
Mhm.
and whose conversions will have a rippling network effect through the rest of the population.
Mhm. And I think the way that we do that is not by trying to just convince people that they're already libertarians, obviously, but rather by saying, hey, you're actually wrong about almost everything. And the people that stick
Yeah.
around when they figure that out are the people that are going to stay, because those are the people that actually care about what are true, right? These are the people you want to be around anyways. Like, I have a friend who it took like about a yearish to convince him, but now he's just like a full blown anarchist, when before he was kind of just a run of the mill conservative. He wasn't like a Republican exactly, but and it's all just
Yeah,
because
no,
of stuff like argumentation ethics, because that he
that
strongly
that is
believes
an
in that.
important point. That is an important point, and it is something that's always annoyed me is the everyone's secretly a libertarian thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely not true. Most people are explicitly not libertarian,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason for that isn't because they've thought about it significantly. It's because they have uh, a somewhat innate preference
Mm-hmm.
for non-libertarianism, and um, I think that's another important point with regards to converting people. Is there is sort of a natural elite of libertarianism in that there is kind of a natural libertarian,
Mm-hmm.
um, but there's almost two different sorts of them. There's the natural libertarian who's a natural libertarian because he's naturally a logician who, when confronted with something true, incorporates it into his belief system.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the natural libertarian who's sort of temperamentally libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this will always be the majority of libertarians, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think there's two important things to realize about this. First of all, the natural libertarians are a very small percentage of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And the other important thing to understand is that temperamental libertarians can be very dangerous to libertarianism,
Mm-hmm.
because they're the sort of person who, when you tell them that they're a libertarian and they just don't realize it,
Mm-hmm.
that actually rings true, right? They are like deep down a libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that if they already know if they already believe something that is almost libertarianism
Mm-hmm.
through instinct alone, they don't actually have to know any philosophy.
Yeah.
And so often they don't learn. They just kind of follow their instincts until one day their instincts take them to something that conflicts with libertarianism. And someone who has read philosophy tells them, well, that isn't what libertarianism is.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they tend to make one of two bad decisions. Um, they either reject logic outright and they say, no, essentially, as a temperamental libertarianism, libertarianism is just whatever I believe. And if I believe it, it's libertarian. And they incorporate their own personal biases that are not true into the philosophy. Or they realize that critic is right and that they're not a libertarian. They don't really know anything about libertarianism. They have some libertarian instincts and will always have maybe a liberal bias, but they're not actually a consistent libertarianism, and so they abandon the ideology.
Um,
So
Sorry.
I think it's very important that we understand that that is the sort of person who is our base
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is people who are predisposed to the philosophy, but in there's a danger in relying entirely on that sort of innate predisposition.
Mm-hmm. I think I have an analogy that might help, but because you're the one that's actually married, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems to me the difference is sort of like a person. You don't want to date somebody or marry somebody, God forbid, who's just with you because it feels nice, right? That's fine. You want them to feel nice with you. You obviously don't want them to feel bad about you, right? That'd be a bad relationship if they feel like they're sacrificing their life by being with you. That'd be very bad and insulting. But you don't want it to be just based on feelings, right? There has to be something beyond. They have to believe in the relationship beyond how they feel in the moment, right? Because the moment will come when they don't feel totally head over heels with you, and the same thing that you'll feel for them, right? Because we're not going to be attracted to the person we're with
Yep.
100% of the time, right? And so you need to have some sort of you could call it ethical or just more so practical too. And I think there's not really exactly a divorce between the two. It kind of keeps you in line. In the same way with like libertarianism,
Absolutely.
it's like it's okay to feel strongly about libertarianism. I feel very strongly, but I also, when my feelings are based on something like, let's say, just oh, I don't want to be against, I want to be against immigration because that being pro-immigration is lefty and that makes me feel bad, right? Is I don't want to abandon my principles just because
Yeah,
I feel yucky, right? And it's kind of the same thing for relationships, is that you can't just, feelings are passing, they'll pass, right? So you need principles that underlie your feelings, that inform your feelings to be correct, right?
I think that's a really great analogy. In the same way that a romantic relationship is never going to start without the romance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're never gonna you're never gonna convince someone to be a libertarian um, if there's sort of a natural hatred of liberty,
Yeah.
right? Like there is absolutely like a natural outlaw and a natural tyrant,
Mm.
and we're not likely to win those people over, right?
And we don't care
And
to.
even yeah, and even in like a future sort of borderline utopian libertarian society,
Mm-hmm.
right, where the elites are libertarian and society broadly follows a libertarian rule set,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there will of course still be imperfection. There will still be crime, and that crime is gonna come from those natural criminals who just they just can't live the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way that you're never going to start a good relationship with someone that you have no care for them or no attraction to them.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to start someone down the path to down the libertarian path if they have a total aversion to doing the right thing.
Yeah.
With that being said, lots of marriages have started with a honeymoon period
Mm-hmm.
and ended with people realizing they actually hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the same way, simply not being just an out and out tyrant or criminal um, isn't enough to make you a consistent libertarian. And if we want people to be good for the cause and stick to the path, we need to help facilitate people who already have that emotional connection develop something deeper, namely a philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of leads me to like why I am so enamored by like argumentation ethics, is like, and I kept bothering you with it because I was still trying to fully understand it when we met at the Mises Institute this past summer. But it's like, I can explain, when you're able to actually
Yeah,
justify what you believe instead of just taking on faith, it'll change your life. Your conviction level way up.
yeah,
It's really nice.
yeah. A is great for that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
setting aside just the actual truth of it, it
Yeah.
does feel wonderful.
Oh yeah, totally.
Honestly, that's part of why it took me so long to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just kind of felt too good. I was
Yeah.
like, "There's no way this is true. It
Yeah.
conforms to my bias too well," you know.
Yeah.
Um, I I kept picking at it and diving into it, and I came around. I like arguments now. But that is part of why I like argumentation ethics, not just as sort of the genius ethical proof that it is,
Mm-hmm.
but also as a rhetorical system.
Yeah.
Is because it not only is this sort of unassailable proof
Mm-hmm.
that is going to get your hardcore logicians, right, who they lose a debate and they're like, dang, I guess I have to incorporate this into my worldview now.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gives someone who is inclined towards libertarianism
Mm-hmm.
a weapon which they can use to stay the path.
Yeah. Maybe real quick. Well, I say real quick. It's argumentation ethics. Do you think you could go through argumentation real quick? I could also go through it if you don't if you don't have anything written down or you don't want to.
Oh, I don't have anything written down, but I probably could do it. Argumentation ethics is a theory created by the great Hans Hermann Hoppe
Mm-hmm.
as a proof of the validity of the non-aggression principle. And the best version I've heard of the argument goes something like this. Argumentation is the use of the scarce means of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right, your body, um, to make to make a point, right? So there's a consistent definition of what argumentation is, and sort of definitionally, anything that isn't argumentation is not argumentation. So to engage in an argument, right, one must make logical, reasoned points, and this is the only way of establishing something as justified or true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what this means is that there can be no uh, justification or proof of the non-aggression principle not being true. Because to make an argument, which is the only way to prove that the NAP is not true, you must assume the NAP. And this is because anytime you make an argument, you are assuming the right to the use of your scarce means and adopting the norm of non-aggression.
Mm-hmm.
So when I make an argument, right, I am using the scarce means, I'm using my property to make that argument, and I'm abiding by the norm of not aggressing against you because aggression isn't an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So if I were to attempt, if I at any time I attempt to disprove the non-aggression principle, I'm engaged in performative contradiction
Mm,
because I'm assuming its validity.
mm,
And to just kind of, I guess this isn't necessarily part of the argument, but to just kind of cut off a quick rebuttal
mm,
in a fast way that I think makes sense. If you break with argumentation, right? If you choose to not make an argument, that is always, of course, something you have the physical option to do.
mm.
But that does not break argumentation ethics because it isn't an argument,
Yeah.
right? So if I make the decision to just try to disprove the non-aggression principle by attacking you with a knife,
Mm,
I may very well successfully attack you with a knife, but that doesn't prove anything, right?
yeah.
That's not an argument. It can't establish a truth claim.
Mm,
Uh, there's no way for me to prove that I should aggress against you without ceasing to aggress against you and instead make an argument, at which point I'm acting according to the norm of property rights and therefore would be engaged in contradiction.
mm. A
That
useful.
was a really dirty explanation because I don't have anything,
It's okay. It's
but I
argumentation
got the
ethics.
gist of it. Yeah.
I don't really blame you. I mean, it's way more easy to understand than any of the arguments for God. So in terms of philosophy, I'd give you a B plus. But a good way to visualize it for people who have just heard this for the first time is a good way to start visualizing it is that whenever anybody tries to justify stealing or murdering or any of these types of things where you're trying to use somebody's body or a thing that they were using first against their will is whenever they try to justify that imagine them standing on top of a tree branch and then sawing it off as they stand on it, right? Is essentially every argument is resting on the premise that peace is goaded and that violence is bad, right? And so anytime that somebody says that peace is bad and that violence is good, right, is that they're resting that, right? They're standing on the tree branch that is the complete opposite of what they're saying. And so that's why you can kind of just dismiss it. I mean, not dismiss it in the sense you still need to argue with the person so they understand argumentation ethics, but that's why any ethic other than the one of liberty, the one of the non-aggression principle, is just it's just refuted by its very proposer, right? Or it's a performative contradiction, as Henry said that Hans Hermann Hoppe famously put it, right? So yeah, I think that's probably a decent enough intro into it. But is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't have anything. That's a good explanation, or at
Okay.
least a good analogy to help with understanding it.
Mm-hmm. So trying to think if there's any other things that would be good to get into. I don't know. Is there anything in the news as of late that you've been wanting to talk about that you haven't really had a chance to?
Um, ooh, not particularly, but I haven't been super caught up with news lately. I've been really busy with work and
Totally fair.
study. Yeah, I'm not super caught up on current events to be honest. I mean, we can just, if you want to, I guess, although I've almost gotten bored of it, we can just go over how absolutely reprehensibly socialist the current American administration is.
Yeah, and we can
Um,
make fun of Angela McArdle for calling him the Libertarian president of the
yeah,
United
oh my
States.
gosh. Um,
Okay, okay.
where do you go with it? Using the military against the civilian populace,
Yeah.
opening a government-run drugstore, uh, taking 10% ownership of a private corporation.
Mm-hmm,
It's been absolutely insane.
mm-hmm. And the lack of like outrage from like the people that pretend to be against this stuff. Like it's amazing to me how quickly the Constitution just doesn't exist to conservatives. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm amazed. I
I,
really
I,
am.
I will say I was happy. I was pretty happy about how libertarians reacted to the Intel deal.
Mm-hmm,
I saw a lot of right-wing libertarians who voted for Trump pull out the fascism word,
right.
um, and that made me happy.
Mm-hmm,
That there was the self-awareness to, obviously, I don't think you can really know hardly anything about libertarianism
mm-hmm.
and see that happen and not understand that it's horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But to publicly speak up or even acknowledge that that this is who you voted for and that you might have made a mistake.
Mm-hmm,
I saw a lot of people do that,
yeah.
which was encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to hear libertarians defend Trump. Just like I really just don't want to hear it anymore. Like it. Yeah. What was I gonna say? I'm kind of forgetting, but yeah, I don't.
Unfortunately, I think one of the best things that could have happened to Donald Trump
Mm-hmm,
in terms of the relatively unimportant issue of maintaining his sort of libertarian-ish right-winger support
mm-hmm.
is the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Um, it clearly won a lot of sympathy back to the right at a time that it was waning.
Oh, for sure.
Um, but that being said, that's already out of the news cycle,
Yeah.
and
Well, they didn't really handle it that well either. Did you see?
yeah, that's the thing. They also grifted too hard, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. A lot of this, to be fair, a lot of this stuff was fake. Like people are posting like Ben Shapiro saying, "I will lift Charlie Kirk's bloody Mike." He didn't say that. That was just it was
yeah.
fake
I
news.
did see a lot of fake stuff, but
Yeah,
still, like,
it wasn't great. Still, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I don't know.
and,
So you can go.
yeah, and even then, like, I did see a lot of people react positively to the idea of the government going after leftist groups.
That doesn't surprise me.
Um, I think that's a very dumb thing to say, although I get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Um, but I think even then, like, any momentum that could have had was destroyed the minute Pam Bondi used the term hate speech.
Oh my gosh.
It kind of woke everyone up and realized, man, these people are insane.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the most important thing for anybody to understand about politics is that like Donald, at least right now, is that Donald Trump really is he actually is fake opposition, and I'm not saying that in a
Yeah.
conspiratorial sense at all. I'm not saying they planted Donald Trump so that we end up supporting him even though he's actually not going against the deep state. I'm not saying any of that. I mean, they really don't like Donald Trump. Like whoever the deep state is, I'm sure they don't like him. But the point is that they both hold the same philosophy. At the end of the day, they're just different flavors of socialism, right? That's why he likes tariffs. That's why he likes owning 10% of Intel. Is that they're just different kinds of socialists. Right? There's the same philosophy, and that's the most important thing. Is the philosophy people hold. And at the end of the day, they're both socialists.
Yeah, and this is probably a very important direction to take our messaging, for people who I guess have sort of public messaging reach.
Mm-hmm.
Is
I'm working on it.
The catastrophe of the Trump administration is a fantastic opportunity for libertarians to learn their lesson about allies, namely that we don't need them.
Yeah.
Rothbard, of course, spent a lot of time in the political left in the 60s because of the anti-Vietnam movement. He forsake a lot of his conservative friends because of the anti-Vietnam movement. And he was hesitant highly about the anti-communist right and warnings of communist influence in America, because the right was pro-Vietnam. And this did not work out well, right? Being an ally of the left didn't get Rothbard anywhere, and he ends up getting increasingly frustrated with the state of the left and the state of communist influence in the U.S. This sort of led to him moving right until eventually we get Rothbard Rockwell and the paleo strategy, and the allegiance between Rothbard and paleo libertarianism. But it is noticeable that Rothbard did not die a great fan of the paleo conservatives. He got very annoyed towards the end of his life at conservatives' unwillingness to learn about economics. And this kind of culminates after Rothbard dies with the George W. Bush administration and the return of this, this sort of driving force in the party as just psychotically pro-war, even among some Republicans who previously had been less interventionist. The Republican Party was really overtaken by this sort of war fervor, and this even leads to the ever right-wing Lew Rockwell, Rothbard's right-hand man at the time that he died, writing an article for LewRockwell.com titled "Red State Fascism," and it's really the election of Barack Obama and the Ron Paul campaigns that sort of swing libertarianism back to the right after what had been a very strong negative reaction to George W. Bush. And so here we see today we've had an America where the progressive project was sort of finally completed. It sort of culminates in all this woke insanity, and this ends with libertarians being the most culturally right-wing they've been in some time. And a byproduct of that is that a large number of them supported Donald Trump as a reaction to the left, and it failed them again.
Yep.
And I forget to mention that the libertarian anti-war movement, was always libertarian. And I don't mean to cast any shade towards some of the guys at like antiwar.com. But they made very close ties with the left because of the anti-Iraq war movement. And a lot of those ties exist to this day. Some of them are very nefarious. Not to cause like too much drama, but in general, I think the anti-war end of libertarianism is just way too friendly to the anti-war left, who only agrees with them on one issue and only because they see being anti-war as a communist struggle against whiteness and Westernism.
Yeah.
I think that the anti-war left started fading away with the election of Barack Obama. Some of those ties remained, but that's part of why we sort of swing back to the right. And so there's always been this sort of cultural swing to the history of libertarianism in the U.S. Since it has existed as libertarianism, right? I would be interested in studying pre-Rand, pre-Rothbard, pre-Lane, even sort of like a pre-World War II, I guess, classical liberal thought.
Yeah, because libertarianism.
I wonder if they had, or even the proto-anarchists, sort of, like the American school of anarchism, Tucker and Spooner and such. I wonder if they had this sort of. Spooner was an anarchist.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was like a mutualist. Maybe that's just an idea of anarchism.
No. Spooner was very much an anarchist.
Spooner's fantastic, by the way, and he's very easy to read.
This is why Rothbard eventually calls himself an anarchist. If you know anything about like debating anarcho-communists, they'll often bring up this paper he wrote in college under a pseudonym and never published, where he says we're not anarchists, and he uses the term like non-anarchists, just to separate from the left anarchist tradition,
It's mostly Proudhon's fault,
and
I
they'll
believe.
say, yeah, and they'll say like, aha, look, Rothbard said that ANCAPs aren't real anarchists.
Bruh.
But of course, in all of his actual published work,
Mhm.
he refers to himself as an anarchist,
Yeah.
and he even explains this change in his view towards anarchy as a term, in that he learned more about the history of anarchism and realized that there was always a free market school of anarchism,
I need to
and
look
that
into that.
specifically American anarchists. Well, so for one, there's a lot of French liberals, true liberals. If you heard Ryan McMahon's talk about Ralph Raico and the history of
That was a great talk.
liberalism,
Mhm.
yeah, they mentioned some of the French liberals were at times anarchists, most notably Gustave de Molinari.
Hmm.
Um,
Has he read
so liberal
anything good?
Molinari,
Hmm.
I'm sure I haven't read too much of him,
Whatever you have
to be
read,
honest.
even if it's just on him, do you have any good resources you could send me after this? Because I would be
Oh,
interested in learning about that.
I would read Ralph Raico's History of Political Thought,
Okay,
recently published by the Mises too.
I
Yeah.
do have a YouTube series of his that I need to listen to, but I'm pretty sure it's just him
Okay.
expounding on what he's written. So,
Well, that might be you're saying by Raico?
Ralph Raico, yeah.
That might be the same as the book because the book is pieced together from his lectures on the
Oh,
history of
okay.
political thought.
That is on my
So
list.
yeah, that might be essentially the same content.
Mhm.
But so yeah, there was Molinari, but also the American anarchists, most notably Benjamin Tucker and Lysander Spooner,
Mhm.
had a sort of propertarian bent, or at least were not completely averse to the idea of capitalism.
Mhm.
And of course, there's De Clare, who she was regularly sort of slandered by other anarchists as being too capitalist, and famously replied, like capitalist anarchism, very well then. So
Amazing.
there was at least sort of proto-capitalist anarchists
Mhm.
before Rothbard. He was the first to sort of properly integrate and systematize free market economics and anarchism, but he was not the first liberal or the first believer in private property to be an anarchist. So I'm interested in if there was that sort of back and forth between the cultural right and left within uh, pre-Rothbard liberal anarchists or just liberalism in general. Because certainly since Rothbard, this is a consistent pattern we've seen where we get pulled right and left culturally, often in reaction to whatever is the reigning power of the day. We're just opposing it.
Mm.
Um, and I don't even necessarily think that's all that bad. I've noticed myself having um, some more, I don't want to say egalitarian because people don't like that word,
Ew.
but yeah, not egalitarian in any sense that Rothbard, for example, would disagree with. But
Mhm.
like legal egalitarianism, right?
Yeah.
And I've certainly become much more concerned about bigotry
Interesting.
since Donald Trump was elected. Um, and I think that that's fine, right? We should be sort of reacting to the enemy of the day. Um,
Yeah,
that
something.
being said, there's been this other phenomenon that's come along with it of us trying to make these sort of temporary alliances on cultural grounds
Mhm.
with either side of the political spectrum. And as far as I can tell, it has never worked well, and we've never benefited. And
Absolutely.
well, though I doubt it, um, I hope that the election of Donald Trump and his betrayal of anyone who believes in any sort of freedom,
Mhm.
uh, I hope that we can use that as an opportunity to learn a lesson about making political allies of people who aren't libertarians,
Mm.
especially with no goal in mind, seemingly. Like
Oh yeah.
the Donald Trump thing is probably the dumbest example, where uh, we obviously just got taken for a ride, and anyone who did vote for Donald Trump on the basis of promises made at the LNC or because they thought that he would just somehow be better than Kamala, at least, they got taken for a ride, and
Absolutely.
a lot of them are starting to notice it that there was no reason to believe any of that. That was a very dumb thing to do. Um, and as much as we extracted the one concession, I guess Ross Ulbricht is free, and I'm very happy for that. There really was no actual plan for how this actually improves liberty.
Mhm.
No one even had an idea. Uh, to the extent that anyone even had a hope, it was mostly just like crunchy hippies hoping that RFK would reveal secrets about vaccines. Like there was no plan at all.
None.
Um,
I
I hope we can take it as an opportunity to learn our lesson. I'm afraid people are taking the wrong lesson. I've seen a lot of people, especially people who were already on the left, just use it as an opportunity to gloat, like, oh, look at how stupid those paleo right wing libertarians are. Whereas a lot of these people have like friends at the Center for a Stateless Society, um, who are explicitly just really friendly with the left, um, and that's also dumb, right? There is a future that will come where the pendulum has swung the other way, and any libertarian who is currently cuddling up to the progressive left because they don't like the Trump administration is going to look just as dumb as the right wing libertarians who cuddle up to Trump do now.
absolutely.
Um,
Just real quick,
so
I
yeah,
wanted to comment on something about Rothbard. Is that
yeah,
when you're going through like the history of anarchism and its relation to capitalism is one of the best things about Rothbard is that he was a great integrator. He obviously read a lot. He read a lot, and so he's able to take all these ideas from these different people that before were more divorced than they should have been, and was able to show how they fit into a bigger picture. And maybe this is a little, I'm gonna say arrogant because I'm not Zulu, but I would say I see a lot of that with Liquid Zulu. Now, to be clear, because Rothbard's done so much work, there's a lot less for Liquid Zulu to do. But Zulu's done a great job of integrating objectivism and libertarianism back together when there was this completely unnecessary divorce because of personal problems that Rothbard and Ayn Rand had. And I think they both had decentish reasons, but I think Rothbard was a lot more justified. But it doesn't really matter. The point is that those are personal problems, and we should put them behind. We should just completely put them behind us and not care about them as far as we are concerned with the philosophy, right? If we're concerned with the individuals in question, then obviously that matters. But I think it's one of the most
I do
important
agree.
philosophical projects of our day. But
I do agree. Obviously, I'm a big Zulu fan. Sue's a friend of mine. I do think he's done well. I will say I'm not 100% sold on objectivist moralism outside of politics.
I think it's
Things
probably
like their
the weakest.
things like their aesthetic theory have never quite made sense to me. I think Sue's project is important. I do agree that in some sense there's not much work to do because Rothbard already had Rothbard being an Aristotelian left a lot of room for you to integrate some of Rand's epistemological beliefs.
I totally agree with that.
I think what's most interesting about Zulu, and the reason I think that he's doing something important for libertarianism, is actually that he's integrating objectivism and anarcho-capitalism by integrating objectivist epistemology with a lot of post-Rothbard anarcho-capitalism.
Like Kinsella and Hoppe?
Like Kinsella and Hoppe. So in particular, he's jettisoned natural rights in favor of argumentation ethics. I think that's pretty important. Even if argumentation ethics were to turn out to not be perfect, to be honest, which I could see happening, right? People are smart. We figure things out eventually. Things evolve.
Well,
although I still believe in it as it stands.
Well, so just real quick on
I think there's
something that makes it a lot stronger is that you have to not just view it as an argument on an island by itself. When you understand a lot more about objectivism, just philosophy in general, but the more you understand about epistemology and metaphysics, I think the stronger argumentation ethics gets, at least on my opinions on metaphysics and epistemology, because that it really does help when you understand those things more with certain arguments against it. But that's kind of just been my experience with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of course Hoppe is a Kantian, and Hoppians are Kantians, and I know a lot of Kantian Hoppians who have sort of tried to further develop argumentation ethics by expounding more on its relationship with Kantian epistemology. And I think if you take the Kantian roots as a given, it makes a lot of sense. And I think you could even say that in some ways it's cleaner than the anarcho-objectivist view. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, Kantian epistemology is kind of bunk. So I think the objectivist path has something more correct, at least. But yeah, I think that's Sue's biggest accomplishment is that he's integrated some of the post-Rothbard evolutions on anarcho-capitalism with a more Rothbardian, objectivist, Aristotelian idea of philosophy as a whole. I do think getting rid of natural rights is critical. Rothbard, if you read like The Ethics of Liberty or For a New Liberty, it is kind of a glaring failure, to be honest. That he never really goes far enough in demonstrating natural rights to actually be true or a thing that exists. And so replacing it or iterating on it or whatever you want to call it with argumentation ethics and with a handful of more objectivist ways of thinking, right? Sort of the Randian proof against whim worship and the objectivist arguments against the law of the jungle, for example. Combining that with argumentation ethics, I think makes for a much more foolproof argument than Rothbard, who, the politics really only makes sense if you take the ethics, and the ethics really only makes sense if you agree with it. Once you challenge natural rights and there's no defense of it, Rothbard doesn't really stand, unfortunately, as an ethicist. So I think integrating Hoppe is really important. And then also Kinsella with the rejection of intellectual property and just a more modern and precise understanding of what the non-aggression principle actually is. And that's a very important point. Rothbard is a property rights absolutist, but Zulu has taken what property is to a level of precision that I don't know that anyone else has.
And And to give everybody else involved their due, when it comes to, I'm not sure how, and not to say that Zulu isn't a genius in my view, but I'm not sure if he could have been able to do it without both Kinsella and who was going to say else, but essentially because of because of objectivism and Kinsella, which have both obviously influenced Zulu a lot. Like I think that's part of the reason Zulu is able to be so good about understanding property rights is because that you really need to have the idea of like the stone concept fallacy always in your mind when really understanding any sort of concept that isn't like right there for you to look at, such as the color red. And so that really helps. And then also Kinsella's like almost over legalism because he's a lawyer, right? And being able to just scrupulously understand ideas because he knows that language can be manipulated because he's a lawyer. That I think both those things have really helped Zulu build on his project.
I agree. Absolutely.
Something I wanted to comment on earlier because I think sometimes it's I think especially libertarians recently, although it seems as you were saying that the pendulum might go over to the left. Although I'm sure those will be libertarians that kind of stay over here and stay over in the right. But something the reason I came to this conclusion just like yesterday or just the last couple of weeks as I've kind of been thinking about this is that I think I hate the right more than I hate the left, and it's not because the right is worse. I actually think that the right's opinions are generally more correct. But the reason I don't like the right is because the left they'll say hey, I mean they don't say it like this because they're not talking specifically to me, but they'll say, hey Tucker, we hate all your ideas, right? We hate capitalism, we hate freedom, we hate all these things. They'll just tell me like outright. Conservatives, they pretend like they like the things I like, but they don't. And the dishonesty is what drives me nuts. And just a good example of this is look at the word capitalism. I think that conservatives have done more damage to the word capitalism than progressives have, because that remember conservatives, because of their nature of conserving, right? They're always having to defend the status quo to some degree. And so whenever the left argues, well, stuff is too expensive and everything's so horrible, the conservatives will go, no, things are so great because capitalism's so great, right? And when you keep defending the status quo by calling it capitalism, you're going to kill the word capitalism because as they stack more and more socialist BS that ruins society, they're going to just pin all of that on capitalism, which is only going to make it worse, right? But an actual libertarian will just go, what? Well, we don't have capitalism, right? We haven't had pure capitalism since like maybe the Wild West. Like for the most part, like we were more capitalist maybe other places, but we've only become more socialist after time. And conservatives just completely ignore this, and it drives me up a wall.
Yeah, well, the thing with conservatives, right, is they can only be the heel, right? It is just a foil to progressivism.
Oh, absolutely.
And it doesn't it stops making sense entirely if you can never appeal to some previous time when things were fine.
Yep.
And so that's just what conservatism will always be. It's inherently thought terminating.
Absolutely.
Because it's never going to provide a future answer. Conservatism is a phenomenon of slowly losing to progressivism. That is essentially the closest definition you can come up with.
Yeah, this was Michael Malice's thing, but it's like conservatism is just progressivism driving in the slow lane, and that's as soon as you understand that, you just have to drop conservatism. Like, and it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to add, or anything else you want to go over?
Oh no. In fact, I probably
you just cut out.
I think I probably do. I probably do need to call it a night soon. Just to go check on the wife and baby.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just end here. This was the Tucker Marlor Show. Thank you so much, Henry, for coming on. The reason I was stuttering is because I read your name on here, which is Harrison Wells instead. So I was like, wait, what? But yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything that you want to promote or anything else?
Sure. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at Harrison Wells AZ. I also contribute once again to the Arizona LP Twitter account.
Okay.
Also, read my articles. I have 2 articles published at Mises.org. One of them was fairly recent. I had a new one come out on 19th about the state of the private security industry in South Africa and what that can teach libertarians.
Interesting.
So check that out at the Mises Wire. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Henry. You have a great day.
Thanks, Tucker. You as well.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.